Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Fazbear Entertainment would like you to put your hands together for the one, the only, Freddy Fazbear.
Rewritten! Gregory was in quite possibly the worst situation he's ever found himself in. And the sad thing was, it was completely his fault. It was dark. So dark he couldn't even see the inside of the container that he'd hidden inside. Metal walls surrounded him, forcing his knees up to his chest, arms trapped against his sides. Some unseen piece of machinery dug into his lower back, his head bent low to avoid the roof of the tiny hiding spot that he was taking refuge in. Sweat soaked his underarms, his forehead, and the back of his neck. The choking air dug its claws down his throat, smelling of his own compressed breath. A mechanism that looked like binoculars was lined up to his face, presenting him a view of the outside world through a video feed. And there, out of that peeping device, he could see the danger that had driven him into such a risky position in the first place. The beam of a flashlight swept over the cracks of the container that he was hiding in, blinding him briefly. Glints of metal were shown to him from that, little glimmering edges that winked out bright against the black. The security guard rolled the massive iron door of the maintenance room out of the way and locked it tight behind her with a resounding clank. She was humming. The voice was silky and carefree, but every note sent icy spiders up his back. It was Vanessa again. Alarm prickled up through his arms. He just got away from her, and now... Security guard stopped, right in front of him, inches away. He bit his teeth together, throat closing up, heart and lungs swelling in his chest. His view from the feed was too far up, hardly able to see any of her at all. Her silhouette was hidden by the glare of her flashlight, only the pale outlines of her uniform's cap in view. But she was there, right there. He didn't dare to breathe, heart punching a hole through his lungs, fighting for more space in his ribcage. Above his head, much too close, was several clicking noises, followed by a final pull. A strange noise that he couldn't identify went on up there, something that reminded him of dice being rolled across a table. The clicks happened again, and then, even closer this time, a creaking noise rang out, like someone opening a stapler. He couldn't look up. He only tilted his head to the side, looking away from the video feed, one eye gaining a strained view of what was happening. Everything was black, pitch black. But he picked up on movement above his head, the flashlight casting patches of pale skin and hair into view. A hand. It reached down through a narrow opening on the roof of the container, oddly clenched, holding something between the forefinger and thumb. He saw a flash of purple. A tiny programming chip. Vanessa's hand felt deeper into the opening it had come down into, now up to the shoulder from how far she was reaching. She could brush the top of his head if she wanted to. But, luckily, she was searching for something on the inner walls, away from the huge reinforced iron box that took up most of the space Gregory was hiding in. She found one of the mechanisms on the wall, some sort of narrow capsules at the front. It popped open at her touch and revealed slots of other green and red chips plugged in. She found the space farthest away from the others and plugged the purple chip in. The hand retreated once the capsule snapped closed, her knuckles knocking against the inside of the container as it left, the top closing again with another click and dunking him back into darkness. All right, Vanessa sighed, voice muffled outside the metal walls. Let's see if this works. Gregory turned his head again and peered through the video feed, sore neck protesting from the position. She was turned away from him now, blonde hair now glimmering white at the edges with the flashlight. It was gathered into a messy ponytail at the back, unevenly cut as if the barber had done the job with their eyes closed, strands looping and splitting in every direction. The security guard turned away from him, standing in the middle of the room now, aiming her flashlight at the ceiling to light up a dark space enough to allow her to navigate towards one of the walls. She messed of something out of view, something beeping loudly, causing his heart to palpitate. And then the container that he was hiding in began to move. Gregory snapped his eyes shut, a terrified squeak escaping him. But, moment by moment, he stayed alive, slowly realizing that he was not in danger. Not yet, at least. His hiding place sat up, shifting the gravity towards the front wall rather than lying down. The clanks and hisses of machinery rattled all around him, still not killing him, surprisingly. But the fear of his hiding place's sudden movement was nothing compared to when it began to speak. What happened? A deep, disgruntled voice called, the vibrations thumping into his eardrums with every syllable. Where's the crowd? Gregory did everything that he could to not react. He couldn't see the voice bearer as he was currently hiding inside of his metallic body, but he knew all too well who it was. Freddy Fazbear, an animatronic built for the entertainment of thousands of small children like Gregory. And right now, Gregory was hiding inside the compartment in his torso, a place that kids usually got to ride in all the time during the day. It was his main function, despite running the place, to give the children rides inside of him, like some sort of inside-out piggyback ride. It was the only real reason that Gregory had chosen to hide inside the huge metal bear. Now, though, he was regretting every decision that he made up to this moment. The security guard rolled the hefty metal door of the small room out of the way, telling the mechanical bear, "You crashed on stage. I finally got you online again. The others are waiting for you." The animatronic bear got up, a bit unsteady at first. Freddy's view of the world was unimaginably high up. The video feed from his eyes loomed at least 10 feet off the ground, a ridiculous height that terrified Gregory even more than the thought of being caught in his riding compartment. Each of Freddy's steps vibrated through his mechanical insides, having to duck far down to exit the room, lumbering out into the hall and straightening up again, filling the place of his presence within an instant. All 4 doors of the gray hall were open, parts and services full of Freddy's entire band as they waited for him. The place was lit by nothing but bright magenta light that came from... Gregory had to hold back a gasp of horror. His eyes zapped from one to the other, still watching the video feed of what the animatronic he was riding in could see. It was Roxy the Fox, Monty the Gator, and Chica the Chicken, other animatronic characters that he'd heard all too much about from other kids. Gregory's eyes snapped to Roxy first, terror fluttering in his core at her canine features. She was the easiest to see, with her brightly glowing magenta patterns, the ones that marked her out to be a fox. The rest of her was colored in shadowy purples and grays, causing her to sink into the darkness, her long black hair falling in sheets down her back, bushy tail flickering behind her in irritation. Her chin was raised, her displeased expression fully on display, with a wrinkled snout and a tight jaw. Her chest was puffed out, shoulders squared, bushy tail lashing back and forth behind her, while the rest of her stayed statue still, like a suit of armor. Her markings were glowing so brightly it hurt Gregory's eyes. Beside Roxy stood the second scariest animatronic, Monty. It was harder to see him properly in the dark, only having the pink light of Roxy to show his eyes the way. He looked similar to Roxy, short and made of angular features with a narrow jaw. A gold tooth glinted out of his lip, leather jacket dark against the glistening scales that rippled across his plating, catching the light. Gregory couldn't see it, but he could still hear the studded bands across his tail scraping against the metal floor. The last one was Chica, the only one in the room anywhere near as tall as Freddy himself. Chica was bulkier than Monty and Roxy combined, her silhouette looming in the dark, a vague outline from the glow being his only way of seeing her. She was made in the image of a bird, piles of pale feathers peeking out from her neck and hips, pastel shades now muted and gray in the dark. She was currently tearing up sinews of her soft arm warmers, her glimmering beak snapping open and closed with a feverish tick. His heart began to kick him harder and harder, the beat of it pressing against his eardrums, sweat trickling down his back. He knew that there were countless children who would do anything for a chance to meet them all face to face, but Gregory wanted nothing more than to burst out of the tiny hiding spot and run for his life. None of them spoke whenever Freddy entered the hall that they were waiting in, the other 3 only lowering their heads and falling still. Shadows darted in and out along the edges, both of the whites and irises of their eyes glowing, making it look like they were suspended there without bodies. Vanessa walked into the middle space between the 4 animatronics, the air crackling with heat as her flashlight shone its brilliant light around at all of them, showing view of belt buckles, green claws, golden feathers. Despite being twice as small as the shortest of them, Vanessa filled the room with such blazing disappointment the animalistic characters winced away as one. "You ruined a lot of kids' nights, you know," Vanessa said slowly, each word drawn out, sharp eyes sliding over each one of them in turn. "Your managers gave me an earful." Monty's hands balled into fists. Roxy's tail twitched again. Chica ripped out a few feathers. But all 4 of the animatronics kept their heads down. "I must have malfunctioned," Freddy finally spoke up, voice deep and rumbling. "I'm sorry, Vanessa." Her gaze softened, pinching the bridge of her nose. I'm sorry. You're all in big trouble, okay? I'm just... She waved the flashlight at them, the concrete walls flashing into view for a moment before being consumed with shadow again. Just go to your rooms, okay? She sighed. I'll try to calm your managers down the best I can. Vanessa turned and left, a door clicking shut to cut off the light from the room. The sounds of a retreating elevator left them alone. Roxy's light washed over them all, casting bright gleams and dark shadows into each other, sharp and humming in and out like a pink campfire. The 4 animatronics stood there blankly for a minute, their colorful eyes glowing neon against the black of parts and services. Roxy and Monty's heads snapped to each other, both holding such hatred in their eyes Gregory had to suppress a shudder. I can't believe this, Roxy growled at the gator, growing brighter. What did you do? Monty didn't bother to respond, lips peeling back to reveal rows of fangs standing his ground. Chica whimpered, closing her orange eyes, her form almost entirely disappearing without them. Don't fight, please, Freddy interjected, holding a broad paw between the 2 smaller animatronics. Not tonight, okay? Roxy and Monty moved back from him respectfully, putting their gazes down again. Without another word, the 4 animatronics left the heavily locked rooms behind, heading off in the same direction that Vanessa had exited. Gregory held on tight as Freddy began to move, all of his being wanting to shriek at the top of his lungs and break out of the mechanical body. But he stayed where he was, taking tiny, strained breaths, peeking out the little gaps between the robot's plating. Kids rode in here all the time during the day, he tried to tell himself. It was safe. Even though it was night now, it had to be safe. Right? The darkness around him didn't contrast well with the video feed, leaving him mostly with an off-color static. The sounds of their clunking footsteps were the only clues that he got of the outside world. Freddy stopped, the animatronics coordinating with something, a new set of sounds coming from the ground that they had stepped on. Freddy went in last to what felt like a set of spiraling stairs, going down, 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 down into pitch-black darkness. The little mechanisms in Freddy whirred and cranked to keep his balance, the stairs creaking awfully beneath them. Gregory's guts clenched into a ball of needles, with each protesting groan from the supports. He pressed his eyes shut, the sounds of metal against metal crackling all around him, the writing compartment jostled with each step. They waded through the silence all the way down, some of them slipping over the rails, even with Roxy's dim lights, nobody saying a word at each mistake. He only opened his eyes when a new light began to pour in. He blinked, squinting at the video feed as the animatronics leveled out into a brightly lit yellow hall. The hall had 4 doors spaced out against the walls, each lined with golden stars, the respective animatronics' names displayed. Their rooms. Hey, we'll all be okay, Chica finally broke out, turning to the others. I'm sure we'll be able to recover from this. Monty and Roxy had already slammed their doors. Before Freddy could say anything to Chica, she whisked inside her room as well, the door locking shut behind her. Freddy stayed there in the empty hall for a few seconds, still staring at their closed doors. Then, with a resounding clank from above, the yellow light of the hall was stolen from them, consuming them in darkness. With a jumping spasm, Freddy turned the brass handle of his room and hurried inside, leaving the black hall behind. Freddy's room had its main lights off, but there was still one brightly glowing globe in the corner, keeping the place lit relatively well. It reminded him of a nightlight, casting the other features of the room into sight. It was a very small area. Off-white walls crowded in on him, covered in layers of colorful papers that were taped there. After a bit of peering at the closest ones, Gregory recognized that they looked like gifts that the children had given to the animatronic. Crayon drawings of themselves holding Freddy's hand, cards of heart-shaped stickers all over the place, even some more refined art styles that looked like they could have come from teenagers or adults as well. Besides all that, there weren't many features of the room. A desk on the left wall was covered in piles of papers, with a mirror set up above it. In the corner was a crippled, Freddy-sized bed frame. One of its legs were snapped, the whole thing bending to the side, wood splintered and rough at the break. The mattress of the bed was taken off and placed in another corner, covered in holes with some of the springs visible from the inside. There were 2 blankets on top of the mattress, one that was ratty and frayed, and another that looked like a repurposed tablecloth with polka dots scattered across its dull surface. Above that pile was a charging station, something that looked like a small fuse box set on the wall, closed up for now with red warnings of high voltage. He'd seen endless warnings to not touch the charging stations all the way inside this place, and the sight of it made him shiver. Oh, no. His heart jerked wildly in his chest. Please, please don't. Sure enough, Freddy walked over to the bed and sat down heavily, the mattress's springs squeaking in protest. Gregory had to do something right now, before... Freddy didn't open the charging box yet. Instead, he held his head in his hands, a strange noise catching in his throat. Gregory turned his head to the side again, looking up with one eye like before. It didn't do anything. The tiny night light wasn't giving off nearly enough light to let him see from the inside. The video feed was a better light source at this point, casting some gray edges on the inside of Freddy's riding compartment. There was a very large box in Freddy's chest that was totally separated from the rest of him, one that was forcing him to bend over so much to fit there in the first place. But in a thin space at the front of that box was the capsule that Vanessa had messed up with before. He could hardly see its curved surface, but he knew it was there. He had an awful feeling about the purple chip that she had inserted there. After everything that he had seen her do all afternoon, he knew that it was bad news. Determination solidified in his stomach. He was not turning into the next story on the front page. So, taking in a steadying breath, Gregory wriggled around, trying to free his arm. He stopped at the first movement, an electrical pulse racking his spine. He waited. Freddy didn't seem to notice. He kept on going. Gregory got his arm above his head, slowly trying to make as little of a disturbance as possible. It was bent awkwardly now, elbow jammed into the walls, but it was able to reach it. Gregory touched the capsule, picking at it until it popped open, feeling for the chip farthest from the rest. His fingers found it. Gregory closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and pulled. Ah! Freddy cried out from the disconnection, the entire world shaking, causing Gregory to hit his head against the back wall. He was lost in the panic for a few horrible moments, ice flooding up his body as the front wall of the riding compartment fell open, paused the size of his entire torso, snatching him up, yanking him out of the cramped, heated space into cold, empty air. The massive head of the mechanical bear shoved much too close to his face, his eyes blinding against the black, white fangs gleaming out of his rippling lips, half of his face encased in shadow. "Stay still," Freddy demanded, eyes flashing brighter. Gregory shrieked in terror, the blue of the glowing, inhuman eyes shooting out into a beam. The broad paws were keeping him locked in a vice-like grip, not letting him go no matter how hard he struggled. The beam from his eyes swept up and down Gregory's body, scanning him. Please, I'm sorry," Gregory pleaded as Freddy finally let him go. "I'm sorry, but please don't kill me." His feet found the ground, but they were already numb from being folded up for so long. He fell over, trying to scramble away from Freddy, blood rushing into his head as he cried. Above him loomed the silhouette of a giant metal bear that looked powerful enough to stomp a car flat. Gregory's back hit the far wall and he crumpled there, Freddy towering above him, filling the room, his back seeming to brush the ceiling. His eyes stood out against all of it, 2 holes jabbed in the sheet of darkness, outlining the thick fur over his shoulders, the gold chains hanging around his neck, the flicker of an earring. Gregory hid his face in his arms, waiting. But Freddy didn't do anything. Gregory stayed down on the floor, curled up, trying to look as small as possible. Finally, Freddy spoke. "You're not in the visitor's database." "I'm sorry," Gregory stammered out, more scared than he'd ever been in his life. "Please don't kill me, please." "Kill you?" Gregory peeked from behind his hands. It was extremely hard to read Freddy's stoic expression, especially against the glaring whites of his eyes. "No, I won't kill you. It's against my programming," Freddy told him, reaching again with a humongous paw. "Are you okay? How did you get here?" Gregory froze up, his legs tingling painfully as feeling returned to them, his lungs and heart throbbing in his chest, nearly choking him. His eyes snapped to the door. He was against the same wall, only a meter away. Instead of answering, Gregory staggered to his feet, ankles loose and toes not responding properly to him. He fell against the door, trying to reach and grasp the brass knob, falling short by a long shot. Gregory was awfully young, and even with him standing on his tiptoes, he still couldn't manage to come even close to reaching it. His panic built as he tried to jump for it, tears spilling down his face, the giant footfalls of Freddy approaching from behind him, closer, closer. "You can't escape that way, it's locked," Freddy said, leaning above him like a tree about to come crashing down. "What are you doing here?" "No, no, no!" Gregory cried, tears spilling down his face as he crumbled to the floor again, covering his head. "Please, please, sir, don't kill me!" Freddy stopped, quiet for a moment, and then his footfalls backed away, making Gregory peek out again to see what was happening. Freddy stood in the middle of the small room now, his paws up to show that he had nothing in them, giving him space. I'm sorry if I frightened you," Freddy said, each word cautious. "I promise that I won't hurt you. You're not in trouble. I just need to know why you're here and how you got here. Did I forget to let you out at the end of a ride?" Gregory coughed and sniffled, trying to get a hold of himself, sitting up against the door and trying to focus on something besides his blinding eyes. The bear wore a pink vest of shorts in the same size, a bow around his neck and a top hat on his head, not doing anything to make him less threatening. Each elephant-sized leg was sheathed in a bristling layer of dark orange fur, his bulky arms the same, connected to broad shoulders that led all the way up to his menacing head. But despite all that, across his big, fuzzy face wasn't the look of a mindless capture machine. Instead, his stubby ears were low, thick brow crinkled. Ashamed. Worried. I'm sorry, sir," Gregory stammered out, a new instinct coming over him. Before anything else could happen, he shot to his feet, locking into the right position. Back straight, feet together, hands down flat at his sides. He lowered his head, saying in a shaky voice, You didn't make a mistake. It was me. I was... He hesitated a moment, brain pumping behind his face as he tried to keep his sentences steady. "I got lost. I saw you sleeping and wanted to hide from the security guards, so I hopped in." He broke into another string of apologies. I'm so sorry, sir. I was just... "What's your name?" Freddy asked, after a pause to process that information. "Gregory," he cracked out, still keeping his eyes pinned to the ground. "Gregory." Freddy's eyes blurred a bit, but he shook his head, coming up with nothing. "You aren't in the visitor database. Please be honest. How did you get into the Pizzaplex?" He froze up. I he stammered, shoving out an answer. I wanted to come see you, but my mom wouldn't let me. I'm sorry, sir." Freddy sighed deeply, but said, "That's okay, I'm not mad. You're not hurt, are you?" He nodded, bracing for it. "And you've learned your lesson now, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Gregory nodded, bewildered again that Freddy wasn't being louder. He was already scared enough of the giant robot bear. If he started yelling, he was sure that he would faint on the spot. "Good," Freddy said, satisfied. He reached with his broad paw, and again, Gregory flinched back, making him hesitate. "I won't hurt you," Freddy reassured. "Just come with me. I'll keep you safe and explain everything to the security guard. She'll escort you to your parents." "Wait, you mean Vanessa?" Gregory squeaked, still keeping curled away from his grasp. Freddy stopped, eyes flickering. "Yes," he said. "How do you know her?" The chip biting into the inside of his palm reminded Gregory of what he had witnessed. "I've been..." He stopped, restructuring the story as well as he could. "I saw her saying something suspicious, and while you were asleep, she put this into your programming thingy." He showed the chip to Freddy with a trembling hand, the purple bit of metal glinting against the light of his eyes. I didn't know what it was," Gregory explained. "I was worried it might do something bad while I was writing in you. I'm sorry." He flinched, waiting for it to finally happen. He was absolutely sure that Freddy would get mad and explain the chip had been important. But instead, the big bear only blinked down at it in confusion, plucking it carefully from Gregory's quivering hand. His eyes flashed of the same blue light, a thin beam scanning over the chip. When it finished, Freddy took an alarmed breath. It's a foreign program, a dangerous one," he said, trailing off. Freddy stayed quiet for several long moments. Gregory waited, a chill creeping up his back. "And you said Vanessa gave this to me?" Freddy asked, eyes back on him. Yes, sir, Gregory nodded, still looking at the concrete floor. Freddy leaned back, falling quiet again. Thank you for finding this, he said eventually. I can show this to the authorities when morning comes to find out what Vanessa was doing. She might have not known what this was. Freddy shook that away, approaching again. Gregory yelped, accidentally running into the door again in an attempt to escape. Freddy halted, keeping still as Gregory scrambled out of his way, panting hard, every part of him alight with shaking as he tried to regain the obedient back-straight, head-down position. Freddy just stared at him, a hurt expression crossing his features. I won't hurt you, Gregory, he said, voice deep and quiet. I just want to get you home to your parents before this place locks down. Gregory caught on to that. Wait, locks down? The Pizzaplex locks down at 9 p.m., Freddy explained automatically. If we're not out by then, it'll be tedious to get the doors to open. He shook his head. But we have plenty of time. That shouldn't happen. When he'd flicked his ears back to dismiss the thought, Gregory noticed a little earring clipped there. It was a small gold loop with a lavender-colored gemstone dropped from it. Freddy touched the door, trying the handle. It didn't open. Oh. Freddy backed up a step. I can't leave my room until the place is closed. Panic crept up, but Freddy kept it at bay with, there is still a way. The doors can be opened from the outside. You can crawl through the vent and let me out. That string of words set off several blaring alarms, but Gregory nodded anyway, too afraid. Freddy had some sort of big black watch strapped around his thick, fuzzy wrists. He unclipped it, taking it off, holding the gadget out to Gregory. Gregory didn't take it at first, so Freddy explained, This is a novelty Faz watch. I can talk to Vanessa with it if she catches you outside. I promise she shouldn't hurt you, but I'm concerned about the chip situation. Thank you, sir, Gregory said. He tapped it experimentally and then finally took it from Freddy, examining it for any secret features that might try and cut off his hand or shock him to death or something. It seemed like a normal digital watch, just Freddy-sized. So, deciding that it was probably safe, he clipped it around his wrist. It was quite large on him, even whenever he tightened it to the smallest size, the band wide and obstructive. Fear needled into his gut whenever he saw the time projected in the corner of the screen. It was 8:45. His mind screamed at him to hurry, but all he was able to do was look up to where Freddy was pointing. The beige room was orange with the dim light, the corners eaten up by shadows. But, after a bit of squinting, a black square at the top of the wall farthest from the door revealed itself to be a vent, based on the glinting yellow lines tracing each metal edge. The vent connects to all of our rooms, Freddy said, tracing a big finger around the room to show where it led. You'll have to turn left and then find the outer vent. It's between Roxy and Chica's rooms. Do you think you can do that, Gregory? Hope glimmered in him. Yes, sir, I'll do that, he said. Freddy approached the desk and, with frightening ease, dragged the whole thing out of the way with one wrench of his shoulders, allowing him to reach the vent. He picked the vent open with his claws, showing a tiny rectangle of complete darkness beneath it. Freddy turned to Gregory, saying, I'll help you up. Anxious all over again, Gregory quietly obeyed, not knowing what else to do. Freddy's huge metal paws clamped into him, sending terrified shivers through his form. He held on, worried that he would be thrown, as Freddy lifted him above his head and pushed him into the small vent, not letting go until Gregory was balanced enough to hold on. Freddy left him there, returning to the moved desk, pushing away papers and searching through a drawer. He returned, holding a blue screwdriver up for him, saying, Take this, you'll need it to get out of the other vent. Gregory tapped it, testing, and then carefully took the tool. It looked safe enough as he turned it over in his hands. And then he looked back at the rest of the vent. The small, cold tunnel was already pushing uncomfortably at the various bruises and scrapes along his elbows and shins, especially at a newer cut along his knee. Gregory had to bend down on all fours, neck already protesting the strange angle, and he was only crouching at the edge. He stared into the waiting darkness, holding back. It's kind of dark in here, Gregory said, fiddling with the screwdriver's handle. The Faz watch can act as a flashlight, Freddy spoke up. If you get lost, contact me in the communication tab. Don't be afraid. You can do this. Gregory blinked at him for a few moments, confused. Then he nodded, realizing that he was probably programmed to be nice to kids, even stupid little brats like Gregory. Gregory poked around the watch until he found the right settings. A flashlight's beam casted out from the top of his wrist, flooding the shiny space of light. He glanced back to Freddy one last time. His eyes hovered against the dark silhouette, a huge mound of shadow that was only faintly outlined by the nightlight. Trying to shove down the squirming nervousness, Gregory turned and crawled away as fast as he could. It was his only way out. The vent thumped too loudly with each movement, the tiny space echoing with his breath's heartbeat throbbing painfully. The light of his fast watch bobbed up and down, flashing against the reflected metal, trying to blind him. A cold breeze rushed past, sending goosebumps over his skin. When he came to the corner, he turned to the left, still retaining his sense of direction. Once he was heading in the direction of the hall, Gregory slowed, sounds of the other rooms prickling at the edges of his ears. He was approaching a vent on the side. He halted when he recognized what he was hearing. It sounded like some sort of a splattering, goopy mess, coming from the grating sounds of a knife, like raw meat being cut away from bone. Nausea cramped up in his stomach. He didn't want to go on. He forced himself to keep approaching, growing lightheaded as he stopped beside her room. Pink light glimmered through the vent in thin lines. Gregory peeked through the tiny shaft. Roxy's markings were glowing so bright it made his eyes sore. Her room was similar to Freddy's, blank and empty, besides a mattress, tablecloth blankets, and a desk. Papers were ripped up and scattered all over the place, crumpled balls of it piling up beside a large bin in the corner. Roxy was leaning over her desk, her nose so close to the mirror it was pressing against it. She had buckets of paint around her ankles, one up on the desk with her right now, beside some wet towels. Roxy was doing something to her face. Gregory snapped his eyes closed and forced himself to move on. When he came across the second vent, he slowed down again. A crash sent terror spiraling through him. It sounded like an entire car being ripped open. He crouched low, clutching the screwdriver close, the vent vibrating with the impact. Once it faded, Gregory hurried past, not stopping to find out what poor object had been thrown. Finally, the last vent that he passed by was Chica's. Silence. Complete silence. It was somehow worse than the other two. Each of his movements were so much louder in comparison, the thumping and scraping echoing harshly. He slowed down, trying to stall his breaths, the cold reaching all the way down to his bones. He didn't dare to peek through the vent, passing by as carefully as he could. Finally, he came across a vent on the right side rather than the left, peeking through. The yellow hallway was now totally blacked out, the only light coming from the fast watch as he worked at the edges to unscrew the vent. Wait, no! Once it popped out, Gregory's fingers slipped, accidentally letting the vent crash down onto the floor with a burst of noise, the sheet of metal rattling far too long afterwards. Gregory cringed, listening. Nothing. He poked his head out into the dark hall, casting the Faz watch's light around. Flashes of his surroundings came. A yellow wall, concrete floors, a dead cockroach. And then, on the wall he was coming out of, he saw the twinkling of 4 brass knobs. The hall felt so much smaller than he had initially thought it would be. It looked hardly wide enough to allow someone like Freddy to pass. Still, it was empty for now. Narrow, but mercifully empty. Working fast, Gregory judged the distance that he had to jump, swallowing nervously. It was far. "Please don't break my legs," he whispered. Gregory carefully eased himself down, holding on tight with his fingers. He accidentally knocked the cut knee on the outside of the vent, wincing as he swung his legs over the edge. He took in a breath, braced for it, and let go. He fell for just a second longer than he had expected, his stomach doing a flip, landing with a loud pap from his ragged sneakers. A brief shock was sent up his body, but he held onto the wall, taking a moment to gather his senses again. All right, he hadn't twisted an ankle yet. Yay. Gregory hurried, now that he was out in the open. He thought that he had hated the vent, but being vulnerable like this down a dark, straight-shot hall was even worse. However, instead of caring to look for Freddy's door, Gregory raced for the exit. Yeah, there was no way that he trusted Freddy. Gregory wasn't stupid. He was out of this crazy place. He went for the way that they had come down here, trying to keep the light steady as it flashed white off the rails of the metal stairs. He tripped several times, but kept on going up and up and up, huffing and puffing hard. By the time he finally reached the top, every inch of his skin tingling, he stopped, realizing that his path was blocked. He casted his light up onto a solid sheet of metal. It was a safe-like door, reinforced and bolted to an extent that seemed ridiculous. Huge metal locks stuck out at the sides, a red keypad lighting up and waiting for a passcode. Gregory stared at it for a few seconds, unable to believe it. What? He stammered, pressing at it. No, you can't! When he regained his senses, Gregory ran back down the stairs, back into the hall again, not giving up yet, a fire lit in his chest. He was not doing this tonight, no way! There was another set of stairs at the other end of the hallway, one that spiraled up and up like the first. He rushed up the steps, praying again and again that it would lead somewhere. But, sure enough, he found nothing but a locked door at the top. It wasn't as solid, but a keypad was still keeping it locked up tight, just as much of a dead end as the first. Gregory had a hard time processing this. A very hard time. He hit and kicked at the door, earning nothing but stinging knuckles and a bruised toe. His frustration peaked, making him cry out, kicking again, even though he knew it wouldn't do anything. Stupid! He whined, pressing his head up against the door. No, please, you can't! Tremors ran up and down his body, growing sick again as he accepted the finality of the situation. Gregory traveled back down the spiraling stairs, defeated. He found himself back in the yellow hall, staring up at Freddy's door. He didn't want to. He really, really didn't want to. Gregory got up on his tiptoes, touching the knob. Head down, he took in a deep breath and pulled it open. You did it! Gregory outright screamed, slamming the door shut again, the voice cutting off. Gasping in and out, Gregory held the door closed in the dark hall, quivering. Gregory? Freddy's voice came through, muffled. What happened? Gregory sighed, trying to calm down. Hang on. Swallowing, Gregory reached up and cracked the door open again, peeking inside. Freddy stood directly in the door frame, towering above him, gem-blue eyes shining in the dim orange light of his room. But he wasn't lunging out to bite his head off, instead clapping his broad paws together, beaming proudly. Awesome job, superstar! Freddy congratulated, much more life pumped into his voice than last time. I knew you could do it! Superstar? Gregory echoed, forcing up a laugh to cover up the brief panic. Thank you, sir. Gregory was a bit amused by that name. It was probably what he was programmed to call all the kids here. It was a bit weird, but Gregory decided not to speak up. He didn't know when Freddy would snap. Freddy left his room, closing the door behind him, sweeping his gaze around with a bit of apprehension to his lowered head. The giant metal bear filled up the hall, broad shoulders able to touch either side if he tilted in the right direction. Again, Gregory scrambled away from him, fearing one of his tire-sized feet would squash him to pulp by accident. Freddy then reached and took Gregory's hand. This way. Freddy's paw encased Gregory's arm up to his elbow easily. It was surprisingly soft and warm, but that didn't help at all. An instinctive shudder ran up through his shoulder, pulling away and falling against the wall, snatching his arms close to his chest. Freddy paused, seeming confused, ears pinned back with a hurt expression. I'm sorry if I frighten you, he said. I promise I won't hurt you. Gregory nodded, a sudden burst of guilt coming to him. He put two and two together with the energetic superstar part. He was trying to be nicer. Freddy turned and continued on without the contact, with Gregory following a few wary feet back. It was only then that Gregory realized that they were going towards the other set of stairs, the second one that he had tried. He decided not to mention his previous tour of the place. As they hurried down the shadow-choked empty hall, they passed the other animatronics' rooms. They passed Chica's room without incident, but when they passed Monty's, a screeching noise tore out from behind the door. It sounded like a door-sized soda can being crushed into a depressed little circle. That was followed by another bang, making Gregory jump. Sorry, Freddy apologized, seeming embarrassed, pushing him along. Monty is in quite a mood today. I promise he's really nice once you get to know him. These people were crazy. This whole place was crazy. He was about to get killed by either a giant teddy bear, a giant iguana, a giant turkey, or a giant dog, and all he could do was nod along and pretend that he was oblivious to their sinister inner workings. Gregory decided to keep his judgments to himself. It was something that he was used to doing around adults. Even though the stairs were made of metal beams, Gregory still winced with every step that Freddy took. The steps creaked beneath his weight, enough to where it wasn't hard to imagine the whole place coming down on top of them. He swore he saw a few bolts missing. The stairs didn't go up for a very long time before they came to the exit door. Freddy entered the passcode, something that Gregory didn't have time to memorize, and then opened it up. He leaned out to check if the coast was clear, then guided Gregory out into the open again. The place was almost entirely dark, but honestly, he wasn't surprised at this point. His eyes were used to the brightness of the Fazwatch, taking much too long to adjust to the new darkness outside the little circle of light. He caught vague outlines of several large boxes, some sort of structures looking like photo booths with colorful, cartoonish art drawn on the side. He wasn't very sure where— "Who's there? I heard that!" Panic impaled him. Vanessa. Freddy turned to him, whispering, "Here, climb back inside, I'll hide you." The giant robot bear opened up his stomach hatch, already reaching to scoop him up. Terror hit him again, the dark space lined of shuddering gears and gleaming circuitry and skeletal metal supports all reaching out to— No, he couldn't,
Oh no!
Gregory broke away from the offer, yanking sharply out of Freddy's grasp. He bolted in the other direction, catching sight of a trash bin, diving behind it instead. He only barely muffled his frantic gasps and covered up the light of his Fazwatch before the flood of light blasted down on the other side of the trash can. The flashlight lit up the colorful tiled ground, surrounding the shadow that he was tucked inside. He curled his feet closer to himself, knees up to his chest, hands over his mouth. "What? Freddy, what are you doing out here?" Vanessa demanded. Freddy buffered for a moment, sending dread through Gregory. He knew it, he couldn't trust— "I thought I heard something," Freddy replied instead. "My door was left unlocked for some reason, and I was worried about you. You've seemed really stressed lately." Gregory stared at the floor with blurry eyes, surprised. "Of course I'm stressed," Vanessa sighed. "Some kid is sneaking around backstage." "Oh, that's bad," Freddy said, feigning confusion. "Do you want me to help look for him?" Vanessa paused for just a few moments too long. Yeah, sure," she said, the annoyance entirely wiped away. "Let's see what you can do, big guy. Follow me." They left, the flashlight's beam sweeping away with them. He released his breath, unsure what to do. He turned off the beam of the Fazwatch, wincing as he watched the little light dwindle and then give into the shadows. He wasn't afraid. He had to survive, not be afraid. Gregory leaned out cautiously, trying to get a look at where he was. Now that his eyes had adjusted, he was able to recognize the place. He was in Freddy's arcade, the first section of the mall, the one connected directly to the main entrance. The large photo booths that he had seen were actually games, the virtual reality ones with the mechanical headsets. With a quick glance, he saw names like Flight of the Chicken and Gator Trump, games that he'd heard of but never got the opportunity to play. The entire arcade was dark, though, giving everything an eerie hibernation state. The neon lights were all grayed out, the bright, cartoonish faces now staring at nothing, the life sucked out of them. The sounds of Vanessa and Freddy's search kept him behind the trash can, her flashlight's cone projecting elsewhere. Gregory turned back to the Fazwatch, too scared to move yet. His stomach took a dive off of a cliff. It was 8:55. Gregory leaned back against the trash can, overwhelmed. 5 minutes, only 5 minutes. Every part of him trembled, begging for him to act. He wanted to scream, to cry, to throw up. "Get to the exit," he told himself. "Just get out. Don't let her catch you." Out of his fear rose a fiery determination. He was not getting stuck in here. Gregory got up, clutching the trash can as he leaned out, trying to pinpoint which direction to run. Freddy and Vanessa were walking around maybe one row of games away. The characters depicted on the outside of the various games stared back at him, watching. "Hey, Freddy," Vanessa said, a curious tone creeping up in her voice. "Can you move this for me?" "Of course," Freddy said. "And how about putting it back?" He did. Gregory casted his gaze around, anxiety gnawing at him. Finally, he found the exit doors. And he wasn't anywhere near them. Out into the vast arcade, dozens of rows over, stood the glassy assembly of colorful double doors. The night outside beckoned to him teasingly. Okay. He tried to calm himself, retracting back into the shadows. Go, just get it over with. Gregory peeked again. He picked his next hiding spot, a game called Puzzled Grizzly. He made sure Vanessa was faced away, and bolted. It was all done in a flash of a second, but he might as well have fallen on his face. With every step of his sneakers, a crunch rippled out from something that he had stepped on. He dove behind the game, lifting his foot, trying to find out what it was. On the bottom of his old shoe was a mischievous candy wrapper. The cartoonish sun that was printed on the paper grinned evilly at him. Gregory ripped it off, crumpled it, and tossed it away, but it was too late already. Vanessa's cone of light pivoted towards him, landing on the space that he had just left.
What was that?
She called out.
Who's there?
It was probably just a mouse or something, Freddy said quickly. I could keep moving things if you want. The flashlight beam was approaching, closer. Terror pounded through his veins. Oh, I think I see him, Freddy shouted. Where? Vanessa's light turned away. Gregory locked onto his next target, a game with a fox running across the street marked out on the side, called Run Fox Run. He looked ahead to check for any more rappers, and then ran for it, this time being infinitely more quiet. He ducked down again, mouth wide open, trying to gulp down air as quietly as possible. Freddy was being much louder now as he moved around, scraping against things and stomping each step, humming anxiously in his attempts to mask Gregory's noise. He found himself internally thanking Freddy, despite everything that he knew about the crazy robot. Gregory hurried along the rows of games, stopping every few ones to glance back and check if Vanessa had seen him. He was almost there, almost... And then Gregory tripped. He freaking tripped. To be fair, it was over a squat metal trash bin that was full of more wads of wrappers. He fell over onto his front, the bin dumping over, palms stinging against the tiles, suppressing a yelp. Vanessa's flashlight was back. Gregory got up, diving into the nearest shadow, escaping the beam. He was almost there, almost. Gregory had his back to Princess Quest, trembling uncontrollably. Before him was another section, the last one, made of smaller, more compact games, placed there to let the outsiders view as many of the others as possible. The rows of doors were marked with electric blue markings, bolt patterns spiking out from the edges, way too energized for the situation. Freedom was right there. But Vanessa's light prowled its way down the walkway that he had just left, closing in. His body failed him. Gregory froze up helplessly. He wanted to give up already. The sheer pressure of all this was building from painful to unbearable. He didn't even want to escape anymore. He just wanted to break down and cry, just to get it over with, stop holding all of the spazzing terror inside of him. This was it. He couldn't move. He couldn't...
Frederick Five Nights Fazbear!
The crash had sounded like an unfortunate arcade game being knocked over. The deafening noise exploded in the dark, followed by a flurrying of apologies.
I'm sorry, Vanessa. I must have slipped over something. Do you have any idea how expensive this is?
Vanessa yelled. Gregory took his chance. He ran. The doors took their time drawing nearer. He passed game after game, adrenaline bursting through him, reaching out almost there, almost... And then the chime of a clock rang through the Pizzaplex. No! Gregory cried out, but it was too late. He came to a grueling stop as a sheath of metal dropped over the doors, cruelly cutting him off from freedom at the last moment. Gregory's hands were on the metal, pushing at it, not even knowing what he was hoping to accomplish by that. No, this couldn't be happening. He had to go back, try again. He'd be faster this time. He just needed a second chance, please.
Wait, shut up! I think I heard him!
Gregory whirled around, body going numb. Vanessa was approaching, her light burning the darkness away like a flamethrower, closer. Gregory froze again. Tears spilled down his face. This wasn't happening. He couldn't be stuck here. He couldn't do this.
Gregory, run! Go!
The voice sent an electric shock through him. It was coming from the Fazwatch. He stared at the thing stupidly. Freddy's voice was coming from it. It was quiet, barely heard above Vanessa's calls for him to come out, but it was enough. Hardly understanding how he was speaking to him through the Fazwatch, Gregory's eyes found the right wall beside the main entrance of the Pizzaplex. The right wall opened up to a different area, an area built of painted bricks covered in starburst patterns, the daycare. In that area loomed a large, heavy-looking golden door with a big red warning sign that marked it as closed. That closed sign was right beside a rainbow circle cut out into the wall, open for him. A slide. It was the only place to go. Gregory sprinted forward, unable to feel his body as he tore across the tiled floors. He somehow made it there, somehow gripped the upper rim of the rainbow slide, somehow swung the rest of him down into it. Darkness swallowed him whole as he fled the arcade, leaving Vanessa's flashlight behind. But even that small victory didn't help. He had been too slow, too late. He was stuck here until morning. And nobody had ever survived a night in Freddy's place. Especially not a child like him. Hello everyone, I have only 3 things to do, so I'll try and do it fast and painlessly so you can get to the lore and move on with your life. So number 1, I'm really proud about how this turned out, and I wanted to see if everyone else liked the changes that I did to this introduction of the game, and I think I did a really good job, and I wanted to hear if everyone agreed or if I just completely flopped and fell on my face. Second thing is, people may be asking me why Gregory seems to be acting out of character. If anybody doesn't know, Gregory has more of an attitude inside the game, and the only reason why I made him more frightened right now is because that's how an actual child would react to the situation. Don't worry, once he gets more, comfortable with Freddy, he'll start to act like himself, but I know that there's gonna be people asking, this Gregory is stupid, or something like that. Why is he acting like this? So I just wanted to answer this. This is how an actual child would react. But, second thing, most important thing, this is the thing I'm really apologetic for. Everyone is going to be commenting about this, and I just wanted to address it. Yes, the night starts at 9 o'clock. And I'm so sorry. There's so much stuff that goes on in the rewrite. Enough that whenever I timed it out, there was no possible way it all happens in 6 hours. We need 12 hours for this story to pan out. And I did not want this to be a plot hole where people are like, actually, I have the calculator right here. There's no possible way they would be able to do this in 6 hours. So I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I have to make this sacrifice. The Pizzaplex closes at 9 and opens at 9. Trust me, once you get the rest of the rewrite out and you can see it, you're going to be like, yeah, okay, you're right. There's no way this happened in 6 hours. So I just wanted to address those 2 questions. One is why Gregory isn't acting immediately sassy for no reason, even though he's inside a terrifying situation. And 2, why did it start at 9 o'clock? It's not even, and I know it's annoying me as much as it is annoying you. It's uneven. All the rest of the games are 6 hours and it starts at midnight, it ends at 6 o'clock. It's annoying me so much. Please spare me from the comments. I'm so sorry about this, but you'll understand once we get to the rest of the story. Okay, sorry, I just promised that this would be painless, and I spent like a whole minute talking. Okay, now you get to go to the lore, TM. Woo, have fun. Yay, I love you all. Thank you for your support. Fazbear Entertainment work email. To Vanessa Miller, from Paige Rhodes. Subject, we could help. We all heard about what happened and want to say on behalf of everyone who works with you that we're sorry for your loss. I know that you want to be left alone, so I'll just say it quickly. We could help fight against your brother taking the company, if that would help at all. I'm sure that we could find some dirt on him. To Paige Rhodes, from Vanessa Miller. Subject, no. I don't care about that right now. Fazbear Entertainment work email. To all, from Jeremy Miller. Subject, new policies, January of 2082. New policies to be active immediately. The staff bots will replace many employees to cut costs and will clean up the Pizzaplex at night. No employee is allowed on the premises at night besides the behavior tracker. The animatronics will be required to wake up at 5 a.m. to prepare for the day. The warm-up protocol will be enacted, and each animatronic will play-test their attractions and rehearse their songs until the place opens at 9 a.m. The animatronics will now only charge their batteries at night, not in the middle of the day whenever the customers are around. The safety collars will be in use again. Redistribute the officers' remotes, and do hourly checks to make sure the collars are being worn at all times. For the new managers, submit daily reports of the animatronics' performance directly to me, including complaints from parents, children, or other employees. Keep tabs on any misbehavior and discipline as you see fit. This is a friendly reminder to never enter the maintenance rooms and parts and services without special clearance. The maintenance rooms are very dangerous for people without the right education of the room's functions. Violations of this rule will be severely punished.